Zali City Gala Tikongo Let's make it a prayer this morning.
Singing from the same hymn book, the aim to launch an organization that will unite African people. That organization was called the South African Native National Congress. It followed Pixley Isaka Seme's call for Africans to unite and forget their past differences. This is what he said.
We are one people. These divisions, these jealousies are the cause of all our woes today.
The movement was necessary because South Africa was changing. Diamonds and gold had been discovered, but Africans were not benefiting. The laws and taxes led to misery for Africans as they forced people to leave their land. It is for this reason that the movement's primary goal was to unite Africans in a fight against land dispossession and the discriminatory laws that were imposed on African people. In 1919, a year after Nelson Mandela was born, this organization in the then Transvaal campaigned against the past laws, while in 1920 it supported the mine workers' strike. This was also the year when government introduced harsher and more racist policies. It was, however, a period of weakness for the organization, as its leaders had different views on how to wage the struggle. Some were of the view that they must continue to send delegations to London to engage the British monarchy on what Africans wanted. Others said these trips to London were not delivering the much-needed results. In 1940s, saw the revival of the ANC as the organization became a mass movement. During this period, the ANC Youth League was formed. Its leaders included Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, and Walter Sisulu. The militant ideas of the Youth League found expression among populace in the cities. This led to the Defiance campaign and the birth of a mass movement. The then government responded by banning the leaders. However, it was too late. On the 26th June 1955, the Freedom Charter was adopted. It is during this time that women were forced to carry passes, and in 1956, they marched to the union buildings to protest the past laws. Later, a group broke away and formed the Pan-Africanist Congress led by Robert Sobukwe. The party led the Sharpeville protest against the past laws. The Sharpeville massacre followed, in which people were killed when police opened fire on protesters. In 1961, the ANC launched the armed struggle after realizing that the peaceful protests were not yielding results. The MK leaders were arrested later in 1963. They were found guilty and sent to Robben Island for imprisonment. The MK then operated from countries that were sympathetic to the ANC's cause. The 16th of June 1976 was another defining moment. The writing was on the wall, and the regime then introduced cosmetic reforms. However, the reforms were rejected and only led to more resistance. In the 1980s, communities, students, youth, and women's organizations mushroomed. COSATU as a labor movement was also born. The ANC called on people to make the townships ungovernable. Resistance was at its peak, and a state of emergency was declared. But February 1990 ushered in historic change, with the ANC and other organizations unbanned. This was followed by the release of Nelson Mandela in 1991, which led to the negotiations with the apartheid regime.
Africa! Africa! Maibuye! Amandla!
The first democratic elections were held in 1994. Millions stood in the snaking queues to cast their ballot for the first time. The aim was to usher in a government that will fulfill the promises made when the ANC was launched and the later commitment to ensure a better life for all.
We are one nation. Our message is that the basic needs of the masses of the people must be addressed. The creation of jobs, of houses, the introduction of electricity, building of schools and hospitals, providing free, compulsory quality education, running water, paved roads. These are our priorities.
The ANC won elections and Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first president of a democratic South Africa.
Let there be justice for all. Let there be peace for all. Let there be work, bread, water, and salt for all. Let each know that for each, the body, the mind, and the soul have been freed to fulfill themselves. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement. Let freedom reign. God bless Africa. I thank you.
However, in 1996, the ANC member, General Bantu Holomisa, was expelled from the party. He launched the UDM in 1997. The ANC celebrated its centenary in 2012. Leaders from around the continent were present to witness a milestone in the history of the oldest liberation movement in Africa.
I think it's a very important centenary, and I think it's important not only for us here at home, but I think important for the continent because, as you would know, this is the oldest liberation movement on the continent, and therefore, to that extent, its history will reflect the way that the African continent has evolved over the last 100 years. The challenges that the ANC has had to address will be more or less the same challenges that the continent has had to address.
I pray that they will be true to where they come from.
You know, it's hard to describe in words one's feelings of today. It is almost nostalgic for my daughter and I.
It was in 1955 when I was in primary 3. That's when some teachers taught us South African songs, including Nkosi Sikelel'. I did not know what it meant. However, our teachers told us that it was a song by our brothers from South Africa, whom they said were all Zulus. We thought that you were all Zulus. That was my first exposure.
Julius Malema, who was the president of the ANC Youth League, was expelled in 2012. He is now the president of the EFF. On the other hand, Terale Kota launched a political party in 2008 called COPE. For some, the dream remains deferred as communities still face challenges of poverty, unemployment, housing, racial discrimination, and gender-based violence. These are some of the remarks of residents of Sharpeville, where the massacre took place in 1960.
So since I was born, the ANC is just an ordinary party that used to fight for older generations. For new generations, it hasn't fulfilled our dreams.
So I assume feel that thing, ANC.
Sharpeville inali history.
Sharpeville is a township with a rich history, and personally, ANC hasn't done any changes to our lives. Many people are not working, and only if they can create jobs for the youth.
Similar sentiments were shared from Soweto, where many young people were killed by the apartheid regime in 1976 Soweto uprising.
There was another mandate of Freedom Charter, whereby they promised people many things. They said this and these people shall govern. Where is that? First, the mandate first of 1923. It didn't change. Then they fought within. By the time of Mandela's era, it's whereby Sobuge went out because they were sending one another out. You understand? That's why they promised the Freedom Charter. Where's Freedom Charter now? People are free. People are governing. People are suffering.
The ANC, they don't fulfill their promises.
Like which ones, if you can name them?
Like water, like electricity, like farming in our rural area. Like me, I'm from Northwest. We don't get machineries for farming. We don't get livestock to do farming, where else we got big hectares where we do. But now they nominate, or no, they can help this one, help that one, help that one, not knowing who this government to be in power. It was all about us all. So I don't know whether now when you are going to the table, they choose who's she. But now, for what I can say, they must just pull up their socks.
The president of the ANC says the party has not veered off the road.
Our origins as an organization were deeply and extensively Pan-African. When our leaders like Nelson Mandela and many others needed to be trained to embark on an armed struggle, they didn't go to any other continent. They went to Africa. They were trained on the African continent. They left their boots in various parts of Africa. So our DNA is Africa. We are deeply African, and we are Pan-Africanist and have always been. And even as we are elevated as a country to various international forums, be it the G7, we always advocate the African story. Be it the G20, we're the only African country that's on the G20. Our message is always about Africa. In fact, we talk more about Africa at times to our own disadvantage or discredit than South Africa, because we really see ourselves as African first. And thereafter, yes, we are South Africans because we were given birth by this great continent.
With the national elections approaching, voters will have another opportunity to give their verdict on whether this oldest liberation organization in Africa is still firmly rooted amongst the people. Sophie, SABC News, Johannesburg.